Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I apologise for being a couple of moments late this morning, but welcome to the show all the same. I am Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly show. Usually goes out live, occasionally goes out recording, very rarely I miss one. It's show number 382. It's Wednesday the 8th of November, and today what we're going to be looking at is the EICMA show from Milan, where there are some interesting bikes and a few comments on a couple of them too, which I will hopefully take you through in just a minute. So what will we be looking at? Well, we have the range of Hondas, which something of a surprise there. A bit of rebranding going on in the 500 range, but the most interesting thing is the fact that Honda brought back the CBR600RR. There are some new 500s from Kawasaki. We'll look at the no-shock arrival of the GSX-8R, a sort of sports bike competitor to the Yamaha R7, based around the Suzuki twin-cylinder engine. They also have an adventure look-alike bike, which could be mistaken for the Tracer 900 at a glance. They also have brought out new softer Tenere, the Explore. Royal Enfield have a quick look at their development mule for their electric bike, and CFMoto, they're using BMW power for their latest 900 twin. Evoke, a Chinese brand, have produced an electric motorcycle, the 6061 GT, with an absolutely monster 30 kilowatt hour battery. And then finally I'll look at a question that's been sort of in my mind for a time now. Is the adventure bike actually the new superbike? So that's what's coming up in the show today. Hopefully we'll find things of interest for you amongst the show. Kevin has looked in, and Clive is also here. Good morning to both of you. Right, okay, now first things first, the weather for the next few days. I'm not going to give you very much detail on this because at the moment the weather is actually mixed. It's a bit difficult to tell exactly what's going to happen where, so check your forecasts, but basically the outlook for the next few days isn't looking too great. It's a grey and miserable day here today. It's starting to get a little bit chillier as well, so as I say, do check your own forecast, but it does look mixed, and it does look like there is plenty more rain on the way over the next few days to add to the saturated ground. Right, okay, so moving rapidly on then. Let's have a look at some motorcycles. The Milan show opened a day or two ago. It's known as by the title EICMA, which stands for something I won't even attempt to pronounce in Italian, but it is the first of the big European shows, and it is often a point at which new bikes are launched, and while some of these that we'll be talking about have been are either revamps of older bikes, or they have been around the clock and they've got a facelift, I think it is worth having a look at some of them. So what we'll start with Honda, alphabetical order, seems as good a way to do it as any. So let's have a look at what Honda have on offer for us. Well, this here is the new, let's zoom in on that. This is the CB1000 Hornet. It uses the 2017 Fireblade engine apparently, and it's said to produce over 150 horsepower and 100 newton meters of torque. Frame's all new, it's steel, which means it's a sort of a back to the future production here. Presumably the twin spar chassis is cheaper to manufacture. Aluminium may be lighter, but you need a lot of specialist techniques to produce sort of aluminium beam frames. Steel is a lot easier in some ways, so I suspect it's an attempt to keep the price, if not the weight, down. Alloy definitely seems to be yesterday's metal. Now the bike does get Showa upside down forks and a monoshock. The instrumentation is via a 5-inch TFT dash, which I believe has been provided by the simple expedient of of pinching the one that's been fitted for the last year to the 800 Transalp. Now this allows Bluetooth connectivity to a smartphone, offering turn-by-turn navigation, presumably via a Honda app, of course. The bike gets 3 default riding mode, and it gets traction control. Now both the inline-4 middleweights, the naked CB650R and the faired CBR600, they've been given a visual makeover, though I quite honestly couldn't see much of a difference, so I haven't bothered with a photograph of them. But both bikes do get Honda's new e-clutch technology, which I mentioned a few shows back. This is a way of getting something akin to the dual clutch technology that you'll find in some of the other models onto a bike with a conventional gearbox. It gives you the sort of functionality which is not the same, but it does allow sort of clutchless shifting by the rider very easily. So it's definitely something that I'm sure will attract some attention. We do have the CB500 Hornet, which is this machine here. Let's zoom in on that. Quite a nice looking little bike, I think. That'll no doubt be very attractive to the owners of the A2 license. I think the restyling job that they've done there is actually quite a pleasant one. The bike gets traction control, gets that body makeover, and it gets the same 5-inch TFT dash, and it replaces the CB500S. So that's the new CB500 Hornet from Honda. Okay, now what else then? Well, there is a new NX500 too. Now this takes over from the outgoing CB500X, but this is where I despair at the quality of journalism. A certain weekly paper reported the new bike yesterday morning. The article says, quote, readers of a certain vintage will recognise the NX designation from the 1988 NX 650 Dominator, an air-cooled trailer that chuffed out of sales rooms for over a decade. Back then it was targeted at urban commuters who wanted comfort, rugged reliability and enough poke to make it entertaining during weekend blasts, much like the NX 500 is today. Well, here's a picture, hopefully, of the old bike. Let's get that up on screen for you. That's the old NX 650 Dominator. There was actually a 500 version of this single too, but that never got imported to the UK. There are also 250 and even a 125, which went by the name of a Transit City actually, but neither of those came to this shore. So sticking with the 650. Now I am of the vintage rider who did remember these. I actually owned one for several years, and whilst it had enough poke to be entertaining, it was perfect as an instructor bike. It was light to manoeuvre, it was frugal on petrol, it was tall enough to get a good view past the trainee ahead of me, so I could see what was going on. But reliability, this wasn't the biggest selling point of any of the old air-cooled Honda singles. There it is, sort of tucked in under there behind the fairing. Now I think anybody who actually owned one of these back in the day would know that keeping an eye on the oil level and changing it regularly on these machines was crucial if you didn't want your top end to turn to grinding putty over the course of a weekend. Now mine got oil changes religiously every 1,000 miles, a new filter every couple of changes too. Now as for comfort, I can happily report that the Dominator was blessed with what is possibly the least comfortable seat I have ever sat on, and that includes a Husky 610 TE incidentally. And also a Corbin seat that was fitted to a BMW. It was custom moulded around the bottom, but unfortunately it was a totally different bottom to mine. Now the problem with the Dominator seat there is I think you can see the first thing, it's quite narrow, but the second thing is you can also see it's quite deep. It was quite spongy, and basically what that meant was it was fine for a sort of 20-minute riding session. So if I jumped off to debrief the trainee after 20 minutes, I wasn't too uncomfortable. But sitting on it for about 50 miles, let alone a longer ride, the thing kind of compressed on both sides, which left you sitting on a sort of an inverted wedge. So I'll leave the rest to your imagination. But if you never owned one or rode one, I guess you could be forgiven for not knowing about these problems. But if you're writing for a magazine, you really should check your facts, because the article continues, quote, "Of course, the new NX500 is vastly more sophisticated than the old Dommy. It's liquid cooled, it's a 471 parallel twin engine, which is far smoother thanks to a crank counterweight and balance shaft." Okay, so you'd be forgiven for thinking that the old Dominator was a vibrated like mad, but it didn't, because it's got a gear-driven balancer shaft. This is the thing here, and it worked. Okay, you know, the single-cylinder motor with a fairly big piston going up and down, it did thud along a bit below about 3,000 RPM, but frankly above that it was really quite smooth all the way to the red line at 7,200. Certainly there were no buzzing handlebars or mirrors or teeth chattering vibration. The twin's smooth, yeah, I've ridden one. It's probably smoother than the single, but it's a different kind of vibration, but far smoother, no way at all. Anyway, moving on from that, what are we getting for our money? Well, here is the view of the bike side on, and again I'll just bring that zooming in for you, and you can see what you're getting for your money here. There's not much information available yet, but what is clear is that the LCD dash, I expect you've guessed this, gets the upgrade to that now ubiquitous TFT 5-inch panel. So there's the new bike. Let's just show you the old bike by comparison. So there's not a lot of difference really. The chassis bodywork all look identical. Everything from the tank backwards looks exactly the same. The new bike does get new springs, get new damper settings, which Honda say improves feel on and off the road, but the big difference is up at the front of the motorcycle, and I think you can see it fairly clearly in that picture there. There are changes there to the fairing and the screen, and also the headlight, of course. Now, Honda say this is to improve aerodynamics and improve stability at higher speeds. So basically what you appear to get there are two winded deflectors, which presumably tried to throw some of the air around the rider's body. The previous screen was a little bit on the narrow side, and the screen is revised in shape as well. The weight still a modest 196 kilograms, 430 pounds, so should be manageable by most people. Seat height is 830 millimeters or 32.7 inches, which actually isn't stratospheric for an adventure style bike, and the motor remains the well proven 47 horsepower A2 compliant unit. Oh, and the bike does get traction control for 2024. No prices yet, but expect everything to go up. But if there was a big shock, this was it. It was the return of the CBR600RR, the bike that went missing in Europe over 6 years ago thanks to emissions regs. Well, this is the 2024 version, and it's back, and it's now Euro 5 compliant. It's still the liquid cooled 499 inline 4. It still revs to around 16,000 RPM, just under that actually. 120 horsepower, 89 kilowatts at 14,500 RPM, and 63 newton meters of torque. So what else? Well, aside from winglets, the biggest change in the years since we last saw the 600RR is the electronics package, and it seems that the new version gets everything that the old Fireblade had. So the standard rider aids include a 6-axis inertial measurement unit, and that includes the throttle by wire. You get 5 riding modes, you get cornering ABS, you get 9-level Honda selectable torque control. There's wheelie control, there's rear lift control, and there are emergency stop signals, which is quite interesting. You also get the electric steering damper as standard, and assist slipper clutch and quick shifter also standard fit. Oddly enough, the report doesn't mention that 5-inch TFT display, but I'd be surprised if they actually left it off. So that's what's new from Honda. Kevin says still waiting to see if the 4th gen CB1000R has IMU standard or optional. I note single-sided swing arm no longer features. Yeah, I would imagine probably just to make things simple. Right, okay, so next company is Kawasaki. Now they have shown off two new middleweights powered as predicted by the 451 liquid cooled parallel twin engine that we recently saw on the show in the new Eliminator 500. Both machines get a LCD display as standard. They get a higher spec version is the SE, and this adds Bluetooth connectivity, USB-C charging port and keyless ignition. The new Z500 and Ninja 500, they claim to have a broader spread of torque and a lower red line than the more focused Ninja 400, which appears to stay on the books. The motor is fitted with a slip and assist clutch. It's A2 compliant at 45.5 horsepower at 9,000 RPM and 42.6 Newton meters of torque at 6,000. And Kawasaki say the bikes should offer reassuring handling and an approachable seat height to ensure they are beginner friendly. Now, Kawasaki also showed off the new Z7 hybrid. Now, this will sell alongside that recently introduced Ninja 7 hybrid. Both have got the same 451 parallel twin motor that I talked about on previous shows, but they're paired up with a 9 kilowatt electric motor. The bike has a range of up to 12 kilometers on electric only, so you're not going to go far, but it'll get you across the average town centre on electric mode. The eco hybrid mode, where the combination of electric motor and combustion engine are paired up, that boosts the power to a total of 58 PS. And the rider can select either manually or automatic gear shifting. There's no clutch, and the manual shifting's done via a flipper switch on the left bar. Now, Suzuki, they unveiled two new models at the show. The GSX-R the GSX-8R sports bike and the GSX S1000GX Sport Tourer. These model designations are a bit of a handful, aren't they? So let's start with the second bike first. Here it is. Let's give you the zoom in picture straight away. I think glancing at that first time on, you could be forgiven for thinking you're looking at a Tracer 900 or even perhaps BMW's S1000XR, but actually it is an all-new machine described as a sports touring crossover. Well, when I say all-new, of course it is based on an existing model, and that's the four-cylinder GSX S1000 GT, so don't confuse your GSX with your GT. It's the same chassis, it's the same 150 horsepower powertrain, but the bike gets a beefier subframe. I'm not quite sure why this particular machine needs a beefier subframe than the sort of the two-up Tourer. Maybe they expect it to be used on slightly rougher roads, I don't know. Anyway, the riding position is more upright. The updated Showa electronic suspension gets active damping with 3 levels. There's a user mode which you can customize to your own preference too, and it's also the first Suzuki to be fitted with a 6-axis IMU, so it's also the first Suzuki to get that now all-important cornering ABS and traction control. I'm sure the second of the two Suzukis is no great surprise to anyone. That's not the right picture, is it? Where have I put it? Oh dear. Right, okay, I'll just kill the pictures for a moment while I try and find the one that I wanted. Where's it gone? Right, well, it was supposed to be the Suzuki sports bike, but I seem to not have got that in the picture list. But it is the long predicted GSX-8R. It's a middleweight sports bike. It's built around the 776 engine platform, the same one you'll find in the GSX-R8S and the V-Strom 800 models. But again, despite the race style fairing, the road intent of the bike is pretty clear. It shows up, in fact, in the fact that unlike most other sports bikes which do actually have a nod towards racetrack heritage with some fork mounted clip-ons, the new Suzuki actually uses standard tubular handlebars with a pair of mounts above the top yoke. So if there's no news on any uprated suspension or electronics either. Weight's up a little, 6 kilograms higher to 2,208 kilograms, mostly I guess because of the new bodywork. The 83 horsepower, 78 newton meter motor, not likely to be bin changed, bar any gearing changes which haven't been announced. There may be slightly higher gearing thanks to the improved aerodynamics, but it won't probably have changed the bike's performance very much over the Naked that was launched just on a year ago. Now, Yamaha appear to have relatively little to show apart from their updated MT-09 and a new higher spec SP version of that triple cylinder street naked, but there is a new version of the Tenere 700, and that's this one here that I just flashed up accidentally, thinking it was the Suzuki. No, that is the Tenere Explore. Now it's apparently targeted as a softer, longer legged all-rounder with reduced suspension travel and firmed up suspension front and rear, which is also to improve handling when loaded or two up. Now the seat height is also down 15 millimeters, but it's still a tall bike. It's 860 mils off the ground, that seat. The 700 Explorer gets a higher screen and it's also a bit wider. And you also get pannier racks fitted as standard, as is the quick shifter. Of course, the touring accessories like the cases that are seen on this particular machine will be extras available. Now, the other bike to look at is the MT-09 SP. Now, the MT-09 itself, the base model, was announced a week or two back, and it gains new looks, which are described as aggressive. Frankly, that redesigned LED headlight, and I'm not quite sure what you call it, a cowl really. I think it's even uglier than it was before as a motorcycle, frankly, but hey ho, what do I know. The machine gets various mechanical upgrades. It gets a reshaped fuel tank too. You also get, hurrah, a Brembo master cylinder and allegedly a sportier riding position. Now the SP adds track-focused electronics, and that's a bit of a mystery since it's a naked. You're not going to be winning many races on one of these, but you get more modes, of course. You get a two-setting engine brake management, ABS, that can be switched off at the rear, and you get a prominent lap timer on the 5-inch TFT display. I'm sure that the organisers of track days will love that. The SP also gets upgraded fully adjustable suspension at both ends, and you get Brembo calipers to go with your Brembo Master Cylinder O. And the SP also features as the first Yamaha with keyless ignition, thanks to the company's smart key system, which allows locking and starting without having to insert a physical key. So I'm sure that the thief population of the country will love that. Now, away from the Japanese manufacturers, Royal Enfield, they were the first company apparently to set off with a press release for this year, and they showcased two motorcycles. First was the all-new Himalayan 452, which we've seen in spy shots for some little while now, and the other was the electric test mule that we have also been hearing about. Now, if I've got my photos right, and I have, this is it. Beautiful backdrop there, isn't it? But so let's have a quick zoom in on the machine itself and see what it looks like. And there you go, slightly clearer. You can see that it is a battery operated electric. It's based on the 452, but the battery is clearly a structural component there. The motor controller apparently are off the shelf items. One other noteworthy fact is that Royal Enfield did say that the Himalayan EV has been through extensive wind tunnel testing to bring down its drag coefficient as much as possible, though for the life of me I fail how to see this is anything other than a brick when it comes to passing through the air. Frankly, I'm surprised that other brands don't do a bit more on the way of wind tunnel testing on their bikes, because aerodynamic drag really eats battery power. So if manufacturers were serious about maximizing range, the first place to look would be a slippery shape. Now, in the increasingly confusing world of who makes what for whom, just as CFMoto have a reasonably well-known tie-up with KTM, the Chinese manufacturer Longxin builds and supplies the F900 engine for BMW, and what that means is that they have access to that bike themselves to build their own machines under the Vosges name. So this is the Vosges Valico 900. So as you probably guessed, you know where the Vosges get their power plant from. It's the 93 horsepower, 895 liquid cooled, fuel injected, 6-speed parallel twin engine, 95 newton meters of torque incidentally, so quite punchy. Bike engine straight from the F900. Now, the Vosges here does get off-road oriented 21-inch front rim with twin radial Brembo calipers up front and a 17-inch rear with a single disc. The wheels themselves are fitted with semi-knobbly tyres, 90-90-21 up front and that 150-70-17 at the rear. The bike comes with 4 riding modes, ABS, traction control, plus an electric quick shifter. The rear rack seems to be standard, but the bars on the side of the engine there and the aluminium luggage kit will be optional extras. Oddly enough, I don't see a bash plate in the list of accessories for that at the moment. Now, if that's not powerful enough for you, then you can always look at the Evoke motorcycle range. Let me get the picture up again. This is it. It's their latest model. They're based in Beijing. It's the 6061 GT, and it's said it's designed for the US market, which presumably explains the sort of cruiser riding position. Now, it's an update of the original 6061 design that appeared in 2020. Now, what part sets the GT apart is, according to the spec sheet, the biggest battery pack of any electric motorcycle on the market today. It's a truly massive 30 kilowatt hour unit, and this promises on the city cycle anything up to 410 miles, 660 kilometers of range. Now, that's usually calculated at sort of a 50 kph 31 mile per hour average speed, but for mixed riding, Evoke still put the range at 497 kilometers or 308 miles. That is miles and miles and miles further than anything else in the class. Even at what they call highway speeds, the range remains 205 miles or 335 kilometers. That's, double something like the Zeros. What's more, the battery can supposedly be charged to 80% in just 30 minutes at a DC fast charger, if you can find one, of course, here in the UK. Now, the bike gets its performance from a 90 kilowatt, that's about 121 horsepower, mid-mounted electric motor. It's said to deliver instantaneous response right across the rev range, right up to the bike's top speed of just over 140 miles per hour. 0 to 60 takes 4.4 seconds. Now, the new model gets what's described as a lighter and more energy-dense axial flux motor, and it's all housed within the company's patented twin-plate exo frame, which is wrapped around that battery and motor. It's designed from aerospace-grade aluminium sheets, and it's designed to conceal the electrical bits underneath. And it's also said, which harks back to what I've just said about the Royal Enfield, it's also said to improve aerodynamics, although of course when you've got a fairly relaxed naked cruiser riding position, the rider is going to act as a bit of a wind sail. And the updated machine does get a wider set of tyres over the original one too. Now, other tech features, you get digital instrument cluster, dual channel ABS, regenerative braking, and you get adjustable suspension for improved performance. Now, given the price premium commanded by electric motorcycles generally, you might be expecting the bike to be eye-wateringly expensive. But in fact, right now, riders in the US and Canada can place an order for this bike, the Evoke 6061 GT, and pricing is currently set at just $24,995 US, and that puts it in line with the current long-range electric motorcycle leader, Energica. Now, shipping though is not expected to begin until April next year. European orders, they'll be taken from early next year apparently for selected regions, although which countries it's not said anything about that yet. Something else which wasn't mentioned in the press release is the weight. I did go digging actually, and I found that, not surprisingly, given the size of the battery, it's a hefty bike, 320 kilograms. 705 pounds, by the way. The only bike I could find, quick search admittedly, with a slightly higher all-up weight, was actually the Suzuki Boulevard M109, otherwise known as the Intruder M1800R. Now, I'd like to think that with this combination of performance, range and fast charging, the Evoke could possibly start to change the perception of electric motorcycles, but it is a big heavy bike. However, there are some worrying comments on their YouTube channel from people who claim to have ordered and paid for earlier models which haven't yet arrived, so do your research. Right, okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that look at the show. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the 11ses, you can catch it every Wednesday, every Sunday at 11, usually live, very rarely recorded, and even more rarely I miss a show altogether. So over on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, that's the easiest place to catch up with a replay if you want to find one. Right, okay, what else have I got to talk about today? Well, one of the questions that's sort of been buzzing around in the back of my mind for a while is to try to answer whether or not the adventure bike is actually the new superbike. Now, one of the recurring themes into research in motorcycle safety has been to look at the link between crash data and rider behavior, and it's frequently stated in the sort of analyses that we still see of motorcycle crashes that it's sensation-seeking riders, the aggressive personality types, who are more at risk on two wheels, because they are frequently found to be overrepresented in crash data. Now, what do I mean by overrepresented? Basically, what it means is if you add up all the riders belonging to all the personality types and divide that total by the number of crashes, you would see what would hopefully be an average number of crashes. But so if more crashes occur in one personality group than another, then you are overrepresented in those crash types. So do a Google, you will come up almost certainly fairly quickly with some research papers on this very topic of rider behavior and crashes. Now, for quite a few years, really since the I guess the mid-1980s, when the type became popular, the finger was pointed steadily at men and men owning sports bikes, and they've been seen as the most likely riders to misbehave on the roads and to crash, at least here in the UK. So there's been a campaign here in the UK, I think getting off 20 years ago probably, by the motorcycle industry, and what this was aimed at was trying to get manufacturers away from the sort of hard-edged, elbows down, bum in the air race replica style bikes towards what were seen as softer, gentler, more sedate adventure tourers. Now, whether it was the industry innovating, or more likely, in my opinion, the aging demographic that has made the big difference, by the early 2000s there really had been a bit of a shift towards adventure bikes. I suspect it was probably because those riders who'd passed their tests sort of 1980s, 85 to 90, were now starting to get a little bit older. You know, the sort of rider that I was teaching to ride doing direct access, who maybe was 30 in 1995, by now they are going to be, well, work it out for yourself. Now, it's not to say that there haven't been dual sports machines around for a long time. At one time, there were in fact any number of machines that could do a bit of both, riding on road, riding off road. I've already talked about the NX 650 Dominator. I owned one. I wouldn't describe it as a competent off-road machine by any stretch of the imagination, but it could certainly cope with some gentle green laning. And if you wanted, there was an XL 650 from Honda, same engine, but a bit less road-oriented. Another bike I rode on off-road was another Honda, a Transalp 650. It was a nice road bike. I really quite liked it if you didn't want to ride at 100 miles an hour everywhere. Whilst I'm sure it would have been a handful on mud, certainly would have taxed me to beyond my limits. On a dry trail, it was actually quite a hoot to ride. The Yamaha XT660, I also had a bit of experience riding one of those. That was definitely a better bike on dirt, but possibly a bit more compromised on the road. Kawasaki, Suzuki, they all had 650 singles too, all capable of mixing and matching. But the really significant shift began around 4 decades ago, and it was a very significant machine that actually started us on this path towards the BMW GS series of bikes. And that this range actually dates back to the 1980 R80 GS. That was a G with a slash through it and then the S. Now the GS stands for Geländestraße, which translates basically as off-road and street. That particular machine featured the 50 horsepower 798cc air-cooled boxer engine that was in the R80 road bike, and it was a distinctive design intended to be both versatile and rugged, to be comfortable for long distance on-road riding and to be capable of coping with off-road riding. Now, it's not to say the Japanese didn't already have some popular bikes in this class too. The original Africa Twin and the Super Tenere, they both spring to mind as bikes about 60 horsepower, enough to get to a top speed of around 150 miles per hour. So nothing like top speed of the bikes, super bikes at the time, but quite capable of doing a bit of everything. Now, the BMW R100 GS was the next upgrade in the BMW range. That came in the late 80s. It was the first generation GS, really. If you take away that G/S 80, it represented a shift towards larger, more powerful adventure bikes. It got a 980 air-cooled boxer engine, and actually I enjoyed riding one of those. I had one for a week in the US. I rode it just about on every type of road you can care to mention. The only time I really didn't like it was on the interstate, when the wide petrol tank and the lack of wind fairing meant that the wind just forced my legs apart, which made it absolute agony at high speed. But it was capable round twisty roads, and it was great fun on a long stretch of gravel road I rode in Colorado. So it was certainly capable of handling light off-road stuff, and basically it flattered my very modest skills in that kind of riding. So it's not unreasonable, I think, to suggest that along with its predecessor, the R80 GS, the R100 GS was probably the bike that established the adventure bike category that we talk about now. And of course, BMW have continued to produce this GS series. The 1000 was followed by the 1100 GS in 1994. That bike got the first of the telelever front suspensions, I believe. Also got the power lever on the back that had first appeared on the previous model. Then there was the 1200 GS that came along in 2004, new generation 1170 engine. That also got ABS, and arguably I would say that was probably the model that began to wean riders away from sports bikes. 2018 we got the 1250 GS, more engine improvements including shift cam technology, better power delivery and efficiency, advanced electronics started to appear, it got riding modes, and it got dynamic electronic suspension adjustment. Now, to get to my point, the power output of the original BMW R80 GS was approximately 50 horsepower, 37 kilowatt, and it produced a maximum torque of around 60 newton meters, 44 pound-feet. But by 2018 on that 1250 GS, the power output had almost tripled to 136 horsepower or 100 kilowatts. Maximum torque up to 146 newton meters, 105 pound-feet. And the latest 1300 that's just appeared is reputed to produce 145 horsepower, 107 kilowatts. The most powerful BMW boxer engine ever produced, yes, but 145 horsepower. The 2000 Yamaha R1 puts out around 150 horsepower, 110 kilowatts. So we're basically back where we started. And of course, other manufacturers have been keen to grab a slice of the pie when they see BMW having such success with these enormously powerful adventure bikes. There's the KTM 1290, for example, reputed to turn out 160 horsepower. One review actually said that might sound absurd for an adventure bike. I'll come on to that. Another review said that with the new Multistrada, Ducati's proved it can do more than just sports bikes. It says that the V4 Rally boasts swanky electronics that one may expect on a sports bike, coupled with exceptional ability to tackle everything that's thrown at it. Now, Ducati claims that the 1158 Gran Turismo engine produces a whopping 170 horsepower. Bike weighs in at no less than 573 pounds or 260 kilograms either. And of course, BMW haven't stood still. They have taken the engine out of their S1000RR sports bike and they put it into their S1000XR adventure bike. That appeared first 2015. That bike back then put out 165 horsepower. So yeah, the 160 horsepower does sound absurd to me. So let's get it straight. I mean, it's not too long ago that 160 horsepower plus a sports bike chassis plus a rider who was capable of riding it would have put you on the World Superbike grid and in with a serious chance of winning. The problem is, of course, being talented enough to ride these bikes, and the KTM 1290 review actually stated that the bike needed a number of electronic controls to make it manageable. And it said that it needed things like the electronic suspension, power output, moderating modes, traction control, ABS and things, just to be able to ride it. So personally, I think we have lost the plot completely. These are no longer dual sport bikes, in my opinion. They're not even the low-risk adventure bikes that the industry was so keen to promote 20-odd years ago. And the prices, well, they've gone stratospheric too. The Rally Multistrada is nudging £24,000. Add the essential extras and you'll be getting close to 30 grand. But how much power do we actually need to have a bit of adventure? Well, years ago I was running Honda CBR600RR singles as a courier bike, 26 horsepower, 80 plus miles per hour top speed, and the machine was really neat for using around town, quite fast enough for city use. It still is, oddly enough, and I was quite happy to run the bike on a 250-mile round trip if I wasn't in too much of a hurry. And I even managed to do a bit of mild green laning on the bike at weekends on road tyres. Now, in fact, with just a bit of owner care, they were reliable enough, they were frugal, and they were very easy to ride. So much so that my brother Lee and his mate Jez got a bit more ambitious with their own pair of 250 singles. They cable tied a higher front mudguard onto the forks. They cut down the front of the seat and somehow managed to squash on a tank from a CB650, which carried nearly 5 gallons of fuel. They had 2 racks constructed either side, which could carry 2 5-gallon jerry cans, one for fuel, one for water, and they fitted knobblies, and then they loaded up with camping equipment and rode out of London. And here was their route: France, Gibraltar, ferry to North Africa, over the Atlas Mountains, across the Sahara, which at that time was around 1,500 miles of tarmac and around 800 miles of sand, and finally they fetched up on the border of South Africa. They then rode the bikes back from their look into South Africa. They didn't want a visa on the passport because it would make it difficult to get in other countries, and then shipped the bike back to the UK, where they converted them back to dispatch hacks. Now that was about 1983-84, so just a few years after the BMW R80 GS had appeared. So much for needing a monster adventure bike to do overlanding trips. Now, to be honest, things have moved on. The RS isn't quite as comfortable on the speeds of modern traffic, I'll agree with that. But just over 10 years ago, Honda launched their NC700X. And again, it was aimed at riders looking for a combination of fuel economy, commuter-friendly features. There was that lockable storage where the tank actually used to be. There's a genuine ability to explore dirt roads, if not mud. The bike was described as a crossover with long travel suspension, agility and commanding riding position for an off-road bike, and an overall package with high standards of reliability, stability, braking, engine performance, a fun and engaging riding experience. Now, I rode one, and whilst I will say immediately that the revised 750 was a much better bike because the engine was seriously sorted out, the gearing was much improved. The NC X series is in essence a return to that affordable sort of 50 horsepower dual sport that was popular sort of back in the mid 1980s, like my Dominator. And I suspect if we didn't fall for this more power, more fun marketing that was used to sell sports bikes all the way through from the 80s to the mid 2000s, it's now infected the adventure bike market. I suspect that if we went back to our sort of more basic roots, most of us would have far more fun on a bike that everybody can ride every day of the week on most conditions without actually needing a techno suite of rider aids to keep it under control. So that's my opinion. But back to my original point, the link between sports bike rider behavior and crashes. Now, I've not seen a single study that looks at the positioning of modern adventure bikes in the market and their link to crash statistics. My guess is that if you are the sort of rider who thinks that you need 160 odd horsepower on a top of the range adventure bike to travel to the middle of Europe, you're probably the sort of rider who thought they needed a 160 horsepower sports bike to ride and have fun on the roads 2 decades ago. And my guess is that if anyone does look at the current crop of hyperbikes, adventure or sports, they'll find them similarly represented in the crash stats. So that's it for today's show. I'll certainly be interested in comments. Kevin says this about the bikes. He says, I recall at the time of the launch of the 1100 GS, widely reviewed as a game changer, claims better than sports bikes from A to B. Yeah, I think I remember a very similar kind of statements as well. I don't necessarily disagree. Having owned a bum in the air sports bike myself, I would honestly say that the sit-up riding position with an appropriate fairing, of course, is actually less tiring. Take the fairing away, and then the riding position is a bit knackering, as I found with that BMW 100 actually. But yeah, I agree with you generally speaking there. So right, okay, that is pretty much it for the show today. I have run on at the mouth a little bit because there's quite a lot to talk about. I did want to match it with that feature there on adventure bikes. Very much interested in your comments on that. Something I forgot, I think, on Sunday was to give the shout out to the supporters. These are the people who had supported me up to last Sunday morning, so there will be a couple of extras who've supported me already this week, which I'll talk about on Sunday. But Kevin, Hallam, Nigel, Brian, who bought a book, Charles Kettle, Helen, Margaret, Ian and Anonymous, thank you all for your support. That is pretty much it for today. Keep an eye on the weather. As I said, it's not looking too good. If you see any other interesting motorcycles at the show, do drop me a line. I'd be more than happy to have a look at them and see what I have to say about them. But till then, if you are out and about on your bike, do stay shiny side up. And thank you once again. I'm Kevin Williams. This has been Elevenses. Stay safe out there on the roads.